Hello,
Hi,
Martin.
Anja.
Okay, I say good morning to everybody. I see that we are 73 right now, so I think that's a good number to start. 74 already now. Good morning, everybody, to experts, to the expertise. And welcome now to our session that we are consecrating on the avian influenza control and, of course, animal welfare. So this intergroup session will focus on the threat of avian influenza to animal and human health and how it's being addressed by the EU animal health law. Millions of animals suffer from this illness, and it always has as a consequences also mass killings for disease control. Recently in France, farmers were to cull 2.5 million animals after an outbreak of the avian influenza. This is also a repetitive seasonal issue, and the objective of today's intergroup session is to learn more about the speed and severity at which this disease spreads and what steps really the Commission is taken to minimize the frequency and the necessity of mass killings due to avian influenza. So today I am happy that we are joined by Professor Mr. Thijs Kuijken from the Erasmus University Medical Center from Netherlands for virus science, infectious diseases between humans, livestock and wildlife. And we have also Dr. Julia Delia Cohen, an SNE veterinary officer from DG Santé from the European Commission. So we will first listen to the both to this presentation and then open the floor for questions and, as always, and answers. And we start just to remember you some practical aspects. So this will be live streamed so that you are informed on YouTube, and the meeting will also be recorded. And the video recording and all presentations will be sent as usual also to all the participants afterwards. And please keep yourself muted when you are not speaking. And of course, as always, you can make your questions using the Q&A function, and they will then as much as possible be addressed at the end of the session. And if you are an MEP and you wish to take the floor, please let us know also using the chat box also as usual. Given the short time that we have at disposal, I would like also my colleagues to, and all the people to be brief in their questions and also afterwards with the answers. So I now give the floor without losing any more time. I give the floor to Professor Thijs Kuijken. Professor, the floor is yours. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very pleased to be a part of this meeting. I'll now share my screen. Just to check, can you see this properly?
I can't personally, but Francisco, you do? No. We don't not yet see your screen.
Okay, I try again.
Yeah. I profit
now.
to
Can you see it?
Also. No. We don't see the presentation. It's also Nadia writing in the chat. So I think nobody sees the presentation so far. Is there something we can do? I don't know.
Thijs, I can try and share it on your behalf if that's easier. I'll give that a go.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Now it seems to work. Okay, great. Now we see.
Okay,
the
very
screen.
good.
Perfect. You have the floor, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. So today I'll speak about the threat of bird flu viruses to humans and farmed birds. Next slide, please. So in the first place, I'd like to indicate that the bird flu virus, highly pathogenic influenza virus, does not occur naturally in the environment, but it is converted. It's a conversion of innocuous form of avian influenza virus once it gets into a poultry farm. And through this conversion, the virus is able to replicate not only in the digestive and respiratory tracts, but throughout the whole body, causing high mortality in poultry. Next slide. In correlation with this, we see that there is an increase in the number of high-path avian influenza outbreaks linked with an increase in the global poultry population. As you can see here, the dark blue dots indicate the growth in the global poultry population with poultry meat production as a proxy, and the light blue bars indicate the number of high-path avian influenza virus conversions per decade from 1950 to the present. Next slide. In an analysis of high-path avian influenza virus infections, we see that of the 39 conversion events that have been seen since 1959, the majority have occurred in intensive poultry production systems, namely 36 of them, and most of them have occurred in Europe, namely 14 of them. Next slide. Of particular concern at this moment is that the current virus that is circulating, called the H5 goose Guangdong lineage of high-path avian influenza virus, this virus has adapted to circulation in wild birds. So this is not the normal situation with high-path avian influenza. The normal situation is given in the top left box, where occasionally the virus appears in poultry and is rarely converts to high-path avian influenza. So there are only sporadic high-path avian influenza virus outbreaks. But at this moment, and for the last few years, this goose Guangdong lineage of high-path avian influenza virus has been present in wild birds and causing a high infection pressure in the environment, meaning that the poultry farms across Europe and elsewhere in the world are at constant risk of becoming infected with this virus. Next slide. And we see this in Europe. This graph shows from 2016 to March of this year, the cases of high-path avian influenza of the goose Guangdong lineage, both in poultry and in wild birds in the European Union. In 2016-2017, the largest outbreak ever in Europe was recorded, but in the year 2020-2021, an even larger epidemic was recorded, and in the current high-path avian influenza season, 2021 to date, the fear is that the outbreak will be even larger, affecting 33 countries with nearly 4,000 reported cases in poultry and in wild birds. Next slide. And this gives a geographical overview of the current goose Guangdong lineage H5 outbreak in Europe to the 1st of March, showing the widespread occurrence of cases both in poultry, the round circles, and in wild birds, the stars, from west to east and from north to south in Europe. And over 10 million heads of poultry have been culled as a part of trying to deal with this outbreak. So besides being a big problem for poultry and for wild birds, it's also a risk for human infection. From 2013 to 2021, there were over 800 human infections with this virus in Europe, Africa, and Asia, of which nearly 500 were fatal. And from 2014 to date, the particular clade that is now circulating in Europe, clade 2.3.4.4, has been found to cause 58 human infections in China and Laos, of which 25 have been fatal. And of concern is that in the last year, as you can see in this graph, there has been a rapid increase in the number of cases in China, for which the cause is not clearly known. Next slide. So recently, colleagues from the ECDC, from the EFSA, and from the European Reference Laboratory for Avian Influenza raised a concern that avian influenza was a new threat to public health based on these 6 different factors. First, the fact that this virus is transmissible to humans, and there have also been cases in Europe, in the UK, and in Russia. Besides that, it is transmitted to mammals besides humans, to wild and domestic mammals, including fox, otter, and polecat, often with a fatal brain infection as an outcome. There is a sporadic identification of viruses with mutations that fit with more efficient mammalian infection. Fourthly, because this virus is so widespread in nature, it is able to diversify very rapidly and also to mix its genetic information with other avian influenza viruses that are present in the environment. Fifthly, there are not only this virus, but other avian influenza virus present in farms and in live animal markets in Europe and beyond. And finally, there are already viruses that have mixed their genetic information and they are present in animals, poultry, pigs, and in humans worldwide. So the concern is that these bird flu viruses evolve further to become efficiently transmissible among humans, and in this way could start a new influenza pandemic. Next slide. So the current measures that we deal with the high-path avian influenza virus in poultry in Europe and beyond are to carry out good surveillance so that we are aware that a virus is present in our geographical area. We carry out good biosecurity on poultry farms in order to try to stop the virus from getting into poultry farms. And if the virus is present on a poultry farm, we kill all the poultry involved in an attempt to stop the virus from spreading further. However, as we've seen that the outbreaks of high-path avian influenza have become worse in recent years in Europe and are now occurring every year or nearly every year, these measures are considered inadequate to stop these outbreaks. Next slide. So last year, an expert group on zoonoses was asked by the Dutch government to recommend measures to deal with zoonotic infections in the future, both in the Netherlands and beyond. And they came with the following recommendations, part of which also were given by the EFSA report from September to December 2021 that was recently published. So the measures are to strengthen the health of the environment, animals, and people from a One Health approach, to improve the monitoring of wild bird populations, to have a yearly independent biosecurity check of poultry farms, instead of culling, to encourage the availability and acceptance for using vaccines against high-path avian influenza in poultry farms. And besides that, to offer an annual human influenza vaccine to farmers working with poultry and pigs, or people working with wild birds, to prevent the possibility of a reassortment between a human influenza virus and this high-path avian influenza virus, and to prevent the future occurrence of such pandemics, to reduce the density of poultry farms and the numbers of animals per poultry farm, so that the transmission of these viruses between poultry farms is reduced, and not to have poultry farms in areas where there are many waterfowl, because this is a risk for transmission of the virus from waterfowl to poultry. Next. So that's all. I have one more slide that I want to show you. Next one, please. I just want to show you that here are the references on which the, no, go back. Go back one. No, backwards. Yeah, this is the final slide. These are the references on which this presentation was made. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to you, and I must say, rather shocking to see these graphics and also the situation. And you are really speaking of a risk of really new pandemic that is going on, and also that the measures right now are not adequate. So a lot I think we need to discuss afterwards, but yeah, we have to change. It's of course about animal welfare, but it's also about the farmers, it's also about human health. But I give the floor now to Dr. Julia Delia-Cohen, whose presentation will really focus now on the EU animal health law. Dr. Cohen, the floor is yours. Thank you also for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the floor and for inviting us to give this presentation today to the intergroup for animal welfare. So let me share the screen first. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. So my presentation today will focus or will give few information on how the current legislation on animal health deals with prevention and control measures for animal diseases, and in particular for avian highly pathogenic avian influenza, the disease of our concern today. And the presentation will focus on this animal health law and the scope and relation to animal welfare, and as I mentioned, few information on the preventive and disease control measures, also what we have in the rules according for the zoonosis, and also some information on the future initiatives that the Commission is is working on. Some fast reminder of the main facts regarding the legal basis that we have for measures related to animal health in the EU. As you may probably all know, that we have now in force and into application a new legal framework, and this is of the regulation on which we call Animal Health Law, which is the basic act, and it was adopted by the European Parliament and the Council in March 2016, and this basic law is supplemented then by additional rules in delegated and implemented acts, which were developed by the Commission, and the Commission still develops. It's still developing supplementary rules for implementation of the basic rules which are laid down by the basic legal act. Animal health law entered into application last year in 21st of April, and during this period since its adoption in 2016 and the date of entering into application, the Commission adopted the essential delegated and implemented acts, which were considered as essential for the implementation of the rules in the Basic Act. What is it about, or what is it, the scope of animal health law? The rules in the animal health law covers the general principles for transmissible animal diseases, of course in kept and wild animals and for their products, and it covers terrestrial, aquatic, and also other animals. And the rules are provided for disease prevention, for surveillance, control, eradication, also for intra-EU movements and entry into EU of animal and products, and also specific specific measures in case of emergencies. Important to mention that it's not in the scope of animal health legislation. The rules which are or the measures which are regulated in other pieces of legislation in EU. So it's not in the scope. The animal welfare rules, the EU veterinary expenditures, including the compensation for the emergency measures which we are taking with the animal, with the control measures for animal diseases, the rules on feed and medicated feed, or on veterinary medicinal products, on veterinary educations, or the rules for official controls. For all these fields, there are other specific pieces of legislation which are regulating the activities in these fields. They are so animal health law from the time when the animal health law entered into force, the old legislation which was regulating the animal health rules and the measures that were in place for controlling, preventing and controlling specific animal diseases were repealed by the new legislation, but specific rules remain in place for animal byproducts, for rules concerning transmissible encephalopathies and certain zoonoses. The animal health rules do not interfere with the animal welfare legislation. They are the rules on which specific rules on animal welfare continues to apply, and without having any impediments from the animal health rules. In addition, important to mention then, in case when the population is implemented on animal health grounds following confirmation of an outbreak of, for instance, highly pathogenic avian influenza, this activity has to be carried out with respect to the rules laid down in regulation, for instance, the 1099/2009, which is the regulation on protection of animals at the time of killing. Moreover, the text of the animal health law clarifies the relation between animal health and animal welfare and mentions that the measures applied under the animal health rules should take into account animal welfare. Considering now that prevention is better than cure, animal health law introduced new elements focused on the prevention aspects. So it's really focused on a lot on prevention measures. It introduces clear responsibilities for different stakeholders regarding preventive measures, and then the measures required for prevention and control of animal diseases were developed following a risk-based approach, starting from prioritizing and categorizing animal diseases in functions of the potential seriousness of their impact on public or animal health, on the economy, and or on the environment. And different preventive elements are regulated within the animal health law framework based on the risk represented by the different disease categories. Here I mention biosecurity, which has to be followed by different stakeholders, surveillance of diseases and of pathogens, the need for the operators to have knowledge on animal health, measures on the use of vaccines or other veterinary medicinal products, or also rules on antimicrobial resistant pathogens. I will not stay too long on this slide with the legal basis requirements on disease prevention. This is only a detail of what I was mentioned before, that they are the animal health law really includes measures and rules for different stakeholders and for details on how on the measures on prevention. So there are rules for operators, for the veterinarians, for the member states, and also for the laboratories for animal health in the animal health field. Again, in case this is a slide with special preventive measures that can be taken or have to be taken to avoid introduction and spread of highly pathogenic avian influenza virus to poultry. So again, the first level of measures, it is indeed, of course, it's attributed to the operators, which has to really take proper biosecurity measures and to prevent the introduction of the virus in their farms, and if the virus however enter, to prevent the spread of the virus, and then the measures that the competent authority has to take or needs to take or may to take in case of detection of the virus in the wild birds, and to protect the introduction of the virus in poultry population. Surveillance, it is another very important pillar of the prevention. Why we need a robust surveillance system for avian influenza. Also with the previous presentation and with the introduction, of course, it is already very well known that this virus it really has a potential to become a threat to animal and to human health in the whole union. And also we have seen that it really creates serious economic consequences. It is also a continuously evolving virus, and then it is very much possible or probable to become a serious risk. And then we need this surveillance to early detect the presence of the virus in wild birds and also in poultry, and being a basic pillar for the risk assessment and also for the adaptation of the measures that we need to take to mitigate this risk. So it is obvious that avian influenza meets all the criteria for the need to introduce this harmonized surveillance program at the union level, and therefore we have, according with the new animal health legislation, a union surveillance program which has to be implemented by all the member states within all the territories territory of that member state. The objective of the union surveillance program is, again, early detection of highly pathogenic avian influenza virus in poultry and in wild birds. Also in species where clinical signs are not easily to be seen. We also focus our surveillance to detect the low pathogenic avian influenza viruses in areas where it can cluster and it may spread between flocks, considering the risk that the low pathogenic avian influenza virus may mutate into and become highly pathogenic avian virus. And also with the surveillance, we aim to increase our knowledge on the zoonotic risk of these viruses. I will not stay very long on disease control measures. It is but yes, we have harmonized control measures for highly pathogenic avian influenza in the EU, starting with the notification, then again with the surveillance, and then the rules that have to be taken in case of suspicion or confirmation of outbreaks of highly pathogenic avian influenza are also regulated in a delegated regulation and also domain rules in the Basic Act. Also, the Commission may take safeguard measures according with the empowerments that it has according with the Basic Act in case, if necessary, in certain particular situation. When considering the disease control measures, we have to have in mind the risk of this virus and of the disease and its presence in the poultry population in particular. So this, again, as I mentioned, the volatile genetic of this virus, the highly probability or the probability to become a risk for the public health, and that therefore we, with our measures, we are we want to prevent multiplication of the virus in susceptible population, and therefore the measures are aiming to rapidly eradicate the virus in the establishments where it has been confirmed. Therefore, the main rules now for the control of the disease, it is of course the stamping out in the establishments where the virus has been confirmed. This is the main rules in the to eradicate the virus in where it has been confirmed, and then of course to prevent the spread there is this important rule to establish restricted zone and also measures of restriction and other risk mitigation measures in the establishments of where poultry are kept in that zone. I will skip these slides on the obligation on suspicion, and also on the measures that the competent authority has to take in case of suspicion. You will receive the presentation and you will be able to consult it in case of need, if you are interested. Again, in case of this, I detailed in the slides measures that we have in place according with the legislation in case of confirmation in affected establishment. For the regionalization, just to mention that is also an important control measures that we have in the EU, and this is important to maintain our trade within the EU from free areas, and also important to continue our exports to the countries which are recognizing our regionalization. So this regionalization is done by the Commission by adopting, implementing decisions, and to include the restricted zone which are established by the member states in these specific decisions, which are adopted very fast after confirmation of outbreaks, and they are adopted with the agreement of the member states with the within the committee comitology procedure. Important to mention the support that we have from EFSA, and EFSA contributes to filling the gaps of knowledge, and it issues scientific opinions upon request from the Commission, assessing specific risks which we may consider that we need new knowledge. It also helps and gathers and analyze the epidemiological and surveillance data from the member states, and issues reports on the epidemiological situation in EU and worldwide, and on the results of surveillance programs. And it also works on developing early warning tools to increase the possibility when the member states may anticipate the periods when the highly pathogenic avian influenza virus may be introduced by the migratory wild birds, and then to strengthen or to increase the period when they can arrange and increase their preventive measures. European Union Reference Laboratory is also participating and adding value to our control, our measures, by developing guidance on the diagnostic and watching to the correct application of the methods, and watching on the correct detection by the national reference laboratories of the highly pathogenic avian influenza viruses. And very important, it also contributes and pay a particular has a particular important role in assessing the genetic evolution of the viruses, and to raise awareness or when this virus has turned into a strain that may represent a risk for public health. In animal health law, I have mentioned, we also have possibilities. I will finish very quickly.
Okay,
I just have only 2 slides. We have possibilities to adopt rules in case of emerging risk and in case of zoonotic strains, and as future initiatives. The Commission has in work rules for vaccination, for using of the vaccines, which are now allowed according with the new animal health law. Therefore, the member states may use such possibility in case to strengthen their prevention and control measures in case of need for their particular circumstances. And the areas which are covered by the future rules for vaccination, in particular for a highly pathogenic avian influenza, are covering the strategies of vaccination, the type of vaccines to be used, of course, the risk mitigation measures and the restrictions, the reinforced surveillance to support disease-free status, and also the recovery period. And this is all. Sorry, I was maybe too long, but yeah, we have a lot to say about highly pathogenic avian influenza and the control and the jobs we are doing in EU with preventing and controlling this disease. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cohen. Indeed, it's quite impressive how many people work around here. You spoke about the EFSA, you spoke also about the European Reference Laboratory, and also the regulation that are applied in order to face this. But nevertheless, as we saw from Professor Kuken, with not such an efficiency as, if I may say so, as the numbers are still growing. So it's always the question how we should not question a little bit more this whole system of intensive farming. But I give the floor without losing any more time. And if you agree, dear colleagues, MEP, I will make ping pong also between the questions coming from the public. So I first give the floor to Francisco Guerrero, give then the floor to somebody of the public, and then come back to Anja Hazekamp, because I was a little bit, I found it not fair. I had in the last Animal Welfare Intergroup a lot of questions from the public and we did not address one together. So if that's okay for you, I will switch a bit among the publics, if that is okay for everybody. So Francisco, you have the floor first. Please go ahead.
Hello, thanks, Tilly. Thanks for the presentations. I have a question to Dr. Kukin regarding the Ukrainian war. We saw in our political sphere and also agri-industrial farming sector a huge push to intensify food production. Well, we don't see a risk assessment of that intensifying food production in the animal sector. And so this brings a lot of risks, as you stated in your data. My question is, does this risk assessment take into contemplation these events like the Ukrainian war, that obviously we need to feed and to have a more diverse production of food, but regarding animal farming, that is not very efficient way of producing protein. Does this risk assessment exist regarding these viruses, or we are just supposing to produce more animal foods and hoping that this will go well in the end? This is just my question. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So the assessment of the EFSA Standing Committee on Avian Influenza does not look at this effect of the war in the Ukraine. The general situation worldwide, however, is that there's agreement of the IPCC and also of IPBES, so United Nations organizations, that we should actually be reducing animal production in order to deal with general problems of the climate crisis and biodiversity loss. So if anything, we should be reducing the number of farm animals that we are producing, not increasing.
Thank you very much also for the concise and clear answer on this. And as I said before, I will go ahead with a question from the public, from listening to us. So it's from Barbara Barbosa, and she says, thank you, of course. And what do you think on including gene editing tools in combination with vaccines to improve disease resistance in poultry? There is an interesting study published some days ago by Roslin Institute on the potential benefits to eradicate PRRS in pigs with a combination of both GE and vaccines. Thank you. So who wants to react on the question from Barbara? Professor Kuyukun, feel free.
Okay, thank you. So that's a very good question. There has been actually by the same institute, the Roslin Institute, a few years ago, they published a study in which they showed a genetically modified chicken that was more resistant to high-path avian influenza virus. But this has not proceeded from there, to my knowledge. I would warn against purely technological solutions to deal with problems that we are dealing with. There's a general consensus that we should be dealing with such problems as we see with increased risk of zoonoses, according to the One Health approach, where we try to improve both human health, animal health, and environmental health. And we should really be looking to more general solutions, as was recommended in the expert group, in reducing the number of farms that are close together in these dense poultry production areas, and reducing the number of chickens per farm. That not only reduces the risk of the emergence and spread of a virus like highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, but also deals with other health problems, for example, from fine particulate matter that affects human health, and nitrogen and phosphate excretion that affects environmental health.
Thank you very much, Professor Kuyukun. Also happy about your answer there, because the other solution raises a lot of other questions. Anja Hazekamp, you have the floor, please. Good morning.
Yes, thank you, Tilly. I hope you can hear me, because I'm quite a construction build here. I want to thank everyone for the presentations. I have a question for Professor Thijs Kuiken regarding biosecurity measures. We see that biosecurity measures often include to keep poultry indoors, since free-range chicken are at risk of getting infected by wild birds. But so is poultry living indoors in closed factory farms. Do you know what the pathways are, the most common routes for animals living in closed environments, how they get infected? And the second question I have is, the European Commission and the Parliament are working, well, we want to drastically stimulate and increase organic agriculture, improve the welfare of animals. So that means hopefully that there will be more free-range animals. while they are at risk of getting infected by wild birds and are again locked in when there is an outbreak. And when they are indoors, they are living in more unnatural circumstances, which makes them more susceptible to diseases. So it seems like a never-ending cycle. Can you give us some tips on how we can break this cycle?
Thanks very much. It's a hard question that you ask, but I will try. In the first place, you ask about how high-path avian influenza virus gets into poultry farms. So indeed, it is really a concern that, despite good surveillance that we have largely in Europe, it doesn't help us to stop outbreaks from occurring on poultry farms, because we see that the virus is appearing in a geographical area. We carry out housing orders and advise farmers to improve their biosecurity system, and yet farms become infected. Even farms that traditionally were seen to be very biosecure, for example, poultry broiler operations, where in the standard setting the animals are inside the whole period of time anyway, even in these farms the virus gets in. And the reason for this is probably because in the current situation, and I have to stress that this is a unique situation with this high-path avian influenza virus, that there's a very high environmental pressure, and that any small gap in biosecurity that maybe in past decades was not such a problem, now is a way in which the virus can get in. For example, via a leaking roof, via people walking in with not completely clean boots, via vehicles that go in and out. So that is probably how it gets in, although it's very difficult and often not possible to say in a particular case how the virus got in. Your second question is a very pertinent one. You say that, okay, if you keep animals, poultry, outdoors, they are at risk of getting infected with avian influenza virus. So again, I want to stress that we're dealing now with a very unusual situation in which we've allowed this high-path avian influenza virus to spread to wild birds, and therefore we have a high environmental load. I think that you cannot expect with the current level of poultry production that we have to have all those animals outdoors. That would be really a risk for high-path avian influenza virus to emerge again on such farms. So I think that it is possible to have animals ranged outdoors, and if the farm size is appropriate, then it's not such a big problem. So I think that you always have to weigh up the pros and cons of the slightly increased risk of a virus incursion onto a farm versus the changes to the welfare of the poultry. And I think it would be possible to have poultry outdoors more, but you really need to reduce the number of poultry that are produced in total. This is an important factor because this is really increasing the risk for emergence of highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, but also of other viruses that we don't know yet, but which may appear in the future.
Thank you very much. And I'm always wondering, when are we going to listen to experts like you? What needs to happen more? I give the floor to Petras Austrevicius as the time is running, and then I come back to the question from the public.
Thank you. I will be very short. To Professor Kuiken, since the bird flu disease is a very changing one. I mean, there are many mutations since it involves, for example, migrating birds. how much, I mean, this aspect of mutation is taken into account once developing vaccines, and to what extent, I mean, for the time of being, those new vaccines which must be developed taking into account new aspects are in a kind of in a pipeline. I mean, when we might expect probably new vaccines to protect the birds stock we have. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much for your question, a very good one. I can make you happy because although there are many mutations happening in avian influenza viruses, the current strain that is causing such problems in Europe and worldwide at the moment has stayed relatively stable in one part of its genetic makeup, namely the hemagglutinin, against which the vaccines are made. So there is currently actually commercially available a vaccine against the current strain of highly pathogenic avian influenza virus that is not being used within the European Union because of the rules that are in place here, but are being used in some countries outside the European Union. And to my knowledge, about 2 billion poultry have already been vaccinated with this virus, with this vaccine. So there is a vaccine available, and at the moment it looks like the virus is remaining stable in this hemagglutinin. We do have to look into the future if we want to use vaccines, that we should be able to update vaccines every now and then, in the same way as seasonal human influenza vaccines are also being updated every year.
Thank you. Thank you also to Petras. There were also questions from the public on the vaccine, but there was one question I would like to raise, because there were two people that were asking about, I tried to find it back, about within the farm to fork strategy, we call clearly for more organic production. So this is a question from Mark Den Hartog. Can Mr. Kuken tell something if there is a difference in risk from getting avian influenza between organic production and regular production? So it's really tackling the question, is not organic farming also one of the solutions?
Okay, if an organic farm has poultry walking outdoors and they're in a waterbird rich area, then at the moment they are at high risk of getting infection in that farm. However, under the housing order, it's very interesting to see, or concerning to see, that actually often farms that are not organic and have this good biosecurity system, supposedly, are still becoming infected. So in this sense, there's not such a big difference at the moment between organic farms and the conventional farms. And also, once the virus gets into a conventional farm with a large poultry flock, the risk of spreading the virus is larger than in an organic farm with a small number of animals. The risk of spread is always much greater from an intensive poultry farm than from a small farm.
Thank you very much. As I don't see any MEP raising the hands, I just take a very last question, and this is, I think, to Dr. Cohen. It's Jan Buitenhuis, who says, thank you very much for the presentation. We understand that the Commission is working on a draft delegated act for vaccination for all category A listed diseases, including HPI. When will the EU draft delegated act be published? A very concrete question, I think, to you, Dr. Cohen, if you want to react on that.
Yes, I just want to mention that thank you for the question, and I think that my colleague, Dr. Barbara Logar, will take this one to reply to it.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, my name is Barbara Logar. I'm Deputy Head of Unit in Unit Sante Animal Health. Well, the Delegated Act on the use of vaccines for disease control purposes is in the final stages of preparation. We had more than 7 expert group meetings on this act during past 2 years. It's a very challenging act that we have developed, and now is in the internal procedures before it will go then for public consultation, public feedback, and of course before the adoption by the Commission, which will be followed then by the submission of the adopted act to the Parliament and to Council. So taking all these procedural steps into account, we hope to have it published, to have it adopted certainly by the Commission this spring, in the following months, and the publication will follow after it passes the period of consultation with the Parliament and the Council. And if all goes well, we can have it published in this autumn. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, and I would really like to thank all the experts that for their presentation, and also all the MEP for their very good question, and all the public, more than 100 this morning that followed this presentation. I think at one moment we should also discuss in the Animal Welfare Intergroup more about strategic and what we really can do. For today, I really hope that they feel better armed and informed in order to discuss that with their colleagues on the level of the member states, but also at the European level. It's really something we should keep an eye on for animal welfare, but also having in mind the One Health concept, the consequences, of course, also for human health. So thank you very much to all of you, and I wish you a very nice day, and thank you again for this very interesting presentation. As I said in the beginning, those will be sent to you, to the members of the Animal Welfare Intergroup after this meeting. So have a nice day and see you. We have the next Animal Welfare Intergroup, the 7th of April, and then take it, save the date, please. Probably we're going to discuss there the strategic plans of the Common Agricultural Policy regarding the aspect of animal welfare, of course. I think it's a very important point now with the bigger flexibility to the member state to make a first analysis on that in our Animal Welfare Intergroup. So see you then, take care, and thanks a lot for having joined.
Thank you, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.